Hello friends, in this professional misconduct series, in last 10 lectures, we have seen the procedure for the investigation by the disciplinary directorate, disciplinary committee or board of discipline as the case may be, and subsequent thereto, the punishment part. Now from this lecture onwards, I will be discussing clause by clause the provisions of Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 to the Chartered Accountants Act. As we are aware, the Chartered Accountants Act, or for that matter, the Cost and Works Accountants Act and the Company Secretaries Act, has got two schedules pertaining to professional misconduct. Schedule 1 has got four parts. The first part applicable to members in practice. Part 2 is applicable to members in service. Part 3 and 4 applicable to both, whether in practice or not. Then we have got Schedule 2, which has got three parts. Part 1 is applicable to members in practice. Part 2 is applicable to members in service, that is not in practice. And Part 3 is applicable generally, that means to both, whether you are in practice or not. This is the broad composition of the schedules as to the applicability to a professional, whether in practice or not. Now today I will be starting with Schedule 1, Part 1 as applicable to a professional, chartered accountant, cost accountant or a company secretary. But before that, let us start with section 21 of the respective statutes, which empowers the director discipline to inquire into any conduct of a member under any other circumstances also. So there are two types of misconducts I can say. One is covered by Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 and the other one is other misconduct. Now other misconduct is to be investigated by director discipline and it covers even non-professional issues. I am using the word non-professional. It does include unprofessional also. What I mean to say, in case of, now why this is there, as per the institute's own statement, this is necessary because a chartered accountant is expected to maintain the highest standard and integrity even in his personal affairs. Deviation will lead to disciplinary action. So even in our personal life, we should maintain dignity of the profession, integrity with the profession. Now the illustration can be like this. If a professional forges the signature of a relative, then it is unbecoming of a chartered accountant. This will be covered under other misconduct, even though he was not a party to the drafting of that will, or he was unconnected with that person whose will has been forged in any professional or other way. That means one cannot take the stand that this was in my personal capacity and it has got nothing to do with the institute. It is incorrect. The director discipline can inquire and the entire disciplinary mechanism will continue even in the case of any activity done by the professional which is unrelated to his professional work. I have given examples, I think one or twice in earlier 10 lectures, just to illustrate, to repeat them. Yaqub Memon was a chartered accountant. He was found guilty in 1993 bomb blast case. Ultimately, he was hanged. Now, his activities associated with terrorism, even after he was concerning with the finances of those terrorists, it is unrelated to profession, it does not matter, he is guilty of professional misconduct. Or a professional misbehaves with his wife and the wife files a complaint with the local police authorities for a domestic violence, and if that fact is known to the director discipline or the director discipline comes to its knowledge, then he can initiate the action because a behavior with his wife leading to domestic violence is unbecoming of a professional and can be investigated under the disciplinary mechanism. Now, we'll go to Schedule 1, Part 1, Clause 1, pertaining to member in practice. Now, what the Clause 1 reads, it says a chartered accountant, or for that matter, a professional, because the wording of all the three statutes is 100% identical. There is not even a single change of word, or not even a comma is there or in one statute and comma is not there in the other statute. That is not the case. It is absolutely 100% identical. A professional in practice shall be deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he, clause 1, I read, allows any person to practice in his name as a chartered accountant unless such person is also chartered accountant in practice and is in partnership with or employed by him. Allows any person, that means if a chartered accountant allows any other person in his name to practice as a chartered accountant, then obviously this is a professional misconduct. This is to protect that unqualified persons should not misguide or should not misrepresent the general public that he is a chartered accountant, because the chartered accountant has allowed him to represent the other person who is unqualified. This will amount to professional misconduct. Now, what is an exception provided therein? If he is a partner, that means A is a partner in XYZ, then A can represent XYZ because XYZ is a chartered accountancy firm or a professional firm of which A himself is a professional, qualified professional, then he can represent the firm. Or A is not a partner but is employed with that XYZ. XYZ is a professional firm, A is a professional employed with XYZ, then A can represent the firm. So with these two exceptions, any other person is not authorized, is not allowed to practice in the name of a professional. The second clause reads like this: if he pays or allows or agrees to pay or allow directly or indirectly any share, commission or brokerage in the fees or profits of his professional business to any person other than a member of the institute or partner or a retired partner or a legal representative of the deceased partner or a member of any other professional body or with such other persons having such qualifications as may be prescribed for the purpose of rendering such professional service from time to time in or outside India. Let us read it. If a member, professional, pays or allows or agrees to pay or allow directly or indirectly, what is not allowed to be share, commission or brokerage in the fees. So if the fees are shared with a non-member, it is a professional misconduct. Or if it is sharing of profits with a non-member, it is not allowed. Exceptions are there to which we are going right now. Or sharing of fees is permissible with sharing of fees or a person other than a member of the institute or a partner or a retired partner or a legal representative. Now let us see these things. If a partner is retiring from the firm, then he can share in the fees as well as in the profits, because it is very likely that A, B, C are three partners in a partnership firm of a professional. A retired from the profession from say 1st April 2021. But whatever work that was performed up to 31st March 2021 by A, the receipts might be received in the professional fees might be received in the subsequent post retirement. Then those fees can be shared. Or if the partnership deed provides payment of profits for a certain years post retirement in the form of a goodwill, it is permissible even though the retiring partner is not at present with the firm as a partner. Or the profits can be shared with the legal heir of a deceased partner. Now, what does that mean? Now, there are two situations. One is of a goodwill of a firm and goodwill of a proprietary concern. In case of a partnership firm consisting of two or more partners or three or more partners, and if the partnership deed provides that in the event of death of a partner, the goodwill will be worked out in a particular manner to be included in the partnership deed, and that goodwill will be paid from the profits of the partnership firm of the remaining partners to the legal heir of the deceased partner. Now, in that case, the deceased partner will share in profits only, provided it is so specifically stated in the partnership deed. Now, the issue was with respect to a proprietary concern. If A is a proprietor, is practicing in his individual capacity, in the event of his death, obviously there is no question of partnership deed, there is no question of continuing partners earning profits, thereby they are in a position to make the payment to the retiring partner or a deceased partner. And in that case, the council has permitted that even a widow or a legal heir can legally sell the goodwill to a new professional who is willing to purchase the goodwill of a professional dying and who is a deceased professional. For example, A is a professional practicing. In the event of death of A, his legal heir, spouse, can sell the goodwill of that proprietary concern to B, another professional, and B can pay certain amount for a specified period to the widow or other legal heir of the deceased person. That means a proprietary concern, proprietor having died, B taking over the practice and agrees to pay say 10 lakh rupees to the legal heir or a widow of the professional. In that case, he can pay 10 lakh rupees legally, officially to the widow by paying say 1 lakh rupees per annum for 10 years or 2 lakh rupees per annum for 5 years. But the period must be specified, and this will not amount to sharing of fees or sharing of profit with a non-professional, the widow. Because this has been given that she has sold or the legal heir has sold the goodwill of a professional relative or husband who has died. Now, what is the procedure that has been prescribed under the regulations? As usual, the application to be made in writing, that is the number one. Number two, the death certificate of a deceased member to be submitted. Number three, agreement for sale of goodwill by the legal heirs to the new professional taking over the practice, that has to be submitted. If the document, succession certificate or a will, that means whatever deceased professional has executed, if any, to be given to the institute. If the sale agreement of self or sale deed for the goodwill is signed by one legal heir, then no objection from other legal heirs to be submitted. And for this purpose, legal heirs include widow, children, and parents only. Other legal heirs, just to give an idea, covered by schedule to the Hindu Succession Act or any other personal law is not relevant over here. Only widow, children, and parents are legal heirs for the purpose of sale of a goodwill of a professional. Now, one more aspect of this clause 2 is that or other professional body or other persons with such qualifications as may be prescribed, to whom sharing of fees is allowed or sharing in profit is allowed. Sharing of fees, sharing of profits, fees and profit, let's take it separately. In case of sharing of fees with other professionals like cost accountants, company secretaries, actuaries, architects, engineers, advocates, and MBAs, with these persons, a professional chartered accountant can share his fees or profits. This is perfectly legal, justified. In short, other than these persons, a professional cannot share his fees or profits with non-professionals, and the word non-professional does not include these activities, these persons. Now, who are these persons? I repeat again: a company secretary with whom you can share the fees and profits, and that's why recently, as you may be aware, the multidisciplinary partnership firms with other professionals are allowed. This was already provided under Regulation 53A and 53B of Chartered Accountants Regulations 1988, and similar parallel provisions under the other professional regulations of other institutes. So, a professional can share his fees with company secretaries, cost accountants. We know who are they. Then engineers of a recognized university. Then then actuaries who are members of the actuaries. Then architects who are the members of the architectural council. Then MBAs who are graduates from university established by law or university recognized by law. That means these are the other persons with whom a professional can share his fees or profits. Suffice for today for these two clauses. Next Saturday we'll consider subsequent clauses. Till then, thank you very much.